So now that you've got a handle on some operational terms and what this position statement from the National Strength and Conditioning Association on LTAD is, we're going to start to crack into the pillars. And so these are the essential components of what LTAD is defined as, what they encompass. And so I'm going to go through a quick overview and then really dig into that first pillar in this talk. So first pillar, we're looking at the concept that youth, even though we see trends and we see them hit certain milestones around the same age and developmental time as their peers, we still have to keep in mind that development of youth, and really anyone, is individualized. We still have to look at athletes and movers as individual human beings. The second pillar focuses on inclusivity. And so even though we're using terminology including athlete, we have to remember that as professionals, I think have an ethical standard to make sure we use our training and we use our ability to teach and to coach and to train, and to make sure that all ages, all abilities, all aspirations are covered. And so this means even the kids, even the individuals that don't necessarily want to become an elite athlete, they still have the right and deserve to have a really quality movement experience, to learn motor skills, to become strong. The third pillar focuses on this dual combination, this kind of synergetic combination where we need to focus on motor skill and muscular strength development in concert with each other in this early childhood and youth. And so it's not only motor skill, it's not only fitness, it's not only strength, but ideally we can develop strength and motor skill best when they are being done together concurrently. Our fourth pillar focuses on the concept of specialization versus sampling. And so we are really looking at some of the detriments of sports specialization. The fifth element is starting to really hone in and focus on the idea that the health and well-being of this kid is our main priority. So even across the whole lifespan, even when we're training adults that might have a very specific sport demand, and knowing that just because an athlete is in a sport and just because they're doing a sport doesn't mean that that sport's always healthy. And so we need to really have a gut check on what that means. Our sixth pillar is that the goal of physical conditioning is essentially to reduce their injury risk. So if that conditioning is meant to support a sport or support something beyond just conditioning itself, we need to remember that one of those major goals is we want to keep them safe. We want to keep them healthy and moving. Training should be done to enhance both health-related fitness and skill-related fitness. And I know in the physical education world, we focus a lot on the health-related fitness area, which is great, but we have to remember there's incredible benefit from also focusing on skill-related fitness. And then conversely, in the sport, we tend to focus a lot more on the skill-related elements of fitness, so agility, balance, coordination, power, speed, reaction time. But we have to go back to what that fifth pillar was, is that the health of our mover is still really, really important. So we need to understand that they might be able to generate a lot of power, but if they don't have the cardiorespiratory endurance at a healthy or health enhancing level, that can be a problem. Eighth pillar is, as professionals, we need to make sure that we are constantly evaluating, assessing, and monitoring. We are collecting data, and there's informal and formal ways to do that, but that's necessary if we really want to say that we're effective, or say that our practices are safe, or say that we're successful. We need to be able to prove it through data, and that comes from monitoring and assessing our movers and our practices. This data will help us in making our training plans. So that's our ninth pillar, is we need to make sure our training programs and plans are progressive in nature, and that we're able to regress if needed, based off of who we're training and who's coming in to see us. And then the last is that qualified professionals are really identified and defined. And so making sure that we as professionals, the training plans we implement, follow best practice, and even educating others, educating coaches and parents, even individuals in schools, school administrators, what best practice actually is, so that when they are in a position maybe to hire someone for their child, or to hire a PE teacher for their school, or a coach or strength coach for their school, that they are following these practices. So with no further ado, we're going to move into the first pillar. First pillar. So specifically, it states long-term athlete development pathways. So that just pathways just mean these are the different avenues, training elements that will allow our mover to be in that long-term athlete development type of plan. These pathways should accommodate for the individualized nature of growth and recognize it is not always linear. It's really easy just to think that everyone's going to develop at the same rate and magnitude as each other, and that just simply does not happen, especially with youth. Also in our later stage athletes, but especially with youth. So a few things we need to keep in mind when we're looking at this individualized development of youth. Kids are not many adults. Sometimes we think they are. Sometimes they come in with just this incredible amount of talent from wherever. When we see them, maybe they're emotionally mature, socially mature, and it's just easy to talk to them and easy to just think, well, we can train them like the adult, or have them do the same program as their parent in their, in this group fitness setting. Not okay. So our training programs must be parallel to the technical ability of the individual, whether they're young or old, and then the stage of development they are. And so that just means emotional development, social development, physical development, and just motor development. And so sometimes we have adults that are at a really low motor development stage. And so we're trying to put them through this really highly technical training program. That's not going to work. It's not going to help them meet what they need to meet their goals. And we'll talk about injury later, but that's going to be a major issue. We also need to identify or understand that there are differences in maturation when it comes to endocrine function, social, and emotional mental maturity. And so just because all kids, or we see kids that might be the same height or look like the same body type, or they might have maybe similar technical ability, what's going on the inside, so in terms of just their systems functioning, is not the same. And then inside, in terms of their heart and their head, is not going to be the same either. We know that even if our individuals are the same age, so say we have a whole bunch of 8-year-olds, their muscle structure, size, how their fibers activate are going to be different based off of where they are in maturation and their genetics. And also just the muscle function, how efficient they're able to function, is not going to be the same. We need to understand that just because someone is the same age, they won't have the same aerobic capacity. We see shorter recovery rates with some earlier maturation types of movers. How they're able to metabolize oxygen is going to be different across these different stages of youth, and even just ability to produce force is going to be different amongst individuals that are the same age. So again, not all kids are going to have that same level of force production. Not all 8-year-olds are going to have that same level of force production. We need to know, I mentioned previously, body systems, they develop at different rates between different individuals, different youth. And so we try to predict as best as we can stages of development or a general time frame. That's where a lot of our benchmarks and milestones come from. We can identify some trends that do seem to come out related to age or related to gender, but we still need to make sure we understand that these are individuals. And we need to make sure that comes through when we're providing options in our training plans and programs. And so despite all of the stages, progressions, general timeframes, milestones, it's still nonlinear. And so we see that we have some differences. We have biological maturity. That's the process of progressing to their physical maturity. That varies in the time it takes for a child, for youth, and the tempo, and in just the magnitude of that maturity that happens. And so we also see, because of this maturity factor and just their opportunity and exposure that they've previously had or currently had, their motor learning varies. And so that's, motor learning is how a mover responds to training and practice and feedback. And also training recovery is going to vary depending on that maturation stage of the child, what they have access to, and just some genetic factors also. And so this really provides a big challenge to us, especially when we're trying to say we're effective or we're successful for teaching and coaching professionals. If we're seeing youth improve in their fitness or in their motor skill, it's actually really hard to pinpoint if we really look at it, understanding that the development is nonlinear and they're in these massive stages of different magnitude of maturation. The improvement that they're showing, is it really due to our coaching or our program, or is it just due to maturation? And so this is something I see a lot in the physical education world, and a non-best practice right now that we still unfortunately see. This is, again, not best practice, is we see PE teachers will use teacher performance measures on most districts now. Teachers have to show that they're effective. Makes sense. And so we see, unfortunately, PE teachers are trying to show that they're effective by showing that their elementary kids' fitness scores are getting better from the beginning of the school year in September until the end of the school year in June. And if you think of again, different magnitudes, different rates of maturation, and just we know how fast sometimes kids can grow, how slow sometimes they can grow in a given school year, in an 8 to 9 month period. If a PE teacher is saying that they're effective because fitness scores got better because they were a good teacher between September and June, but really the kid maybe just matured and got stronger, maybe their cardiovascular system just improved and matured, so they're going to score better on some of their cardio tests, as a fourth grader, that's a really tough thing to claim. And so even as a strength coach, someone who works with youth, or a sport coach who's working with youth, of course, our ego says they're improving because we're coaching better and we're giving them great programming and sequences and practice, which we should, but we have to make sure we're acknowledging that maturation plays a major factor in this. And it also plays a factor in limitation. So if kids aren't getting better, it can be due to just maturation. Or if kids aren't looking like they're improving as much as some of their peers on their team or in their class, again, maturation and the rate and magnitude of that plays a role. And so we really need to make sure that knowing that kids mature differently, it's at different rates, opportunity to be active, to have training and coaching is just important across the entire spectrum. And so we know that more active kids are going to outperform less active kids. Just straight up makes sense. And then not every health and development indicator is going to be something that we can have impact on. And so we know that maturation plays a major role. We also know that socioeconomic status and privilege plays a major role in performance. And so while physical activity opportunities is one big thing, it can be just what those kids have access to. And so a kid that has access to a hitting coach and to club sport and to extra lessons and to really good food and recreation, non-stressful activities with their family, versus a kid that has a really stressful home life, isn't getting great food, isn't getting good quality sleep, isn't getting all these additional opportunities for just general play and recreation, isn't having these additional coaching opportunities, that impacts their rate of development and their sport performance potential. We see overweight and obesity, very high rates of that in our country, in the United States right now. And one of the things we do know, that physical activity opportunity can impact overweight and obesity. We also know that more motor skill competence comes from more physical activity opportunities. And so we're having to kind of navigate this unique aspect where we're trying to prevent physical inactivity. We're trying to prevent overweight and obesity that comes from a result of physical inactivity, but at the same time increase performance in this other world. And so this means that ideally we want to vary the opportunities for our kids of physical activity. We want to give them a variety of training modes, a variety of access points to our expertise as teachers and as coaches, and making sure that they also get a variety of training that's both moderate and vigorous in terms of the physical activity we give them. And so we know that vigorous activity is great too for bone and mineral development across these young ages. So another very, very important factor when we look at just the overall health of our youth. We have some path myths that we want to debunked just a little bit when it comes through in terms of vigorous activity or strength bearing activity. And so Pat Smith said that if kids engage in vigorous conditioning or in strength type of training, that their growth would be stunted, or that they would have delayed development of essentially puberty, their secondary sex characteristics, or that it was dangerous. And what we know now is the past research that was really saying this was very minimal. Studies were taken out of context, and those limitations of the studies that were done were not expressed, which is one of the issues we see in research when